What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomato Boxing Show, and Riyadh season once again delivered a pretty interesting show. Knockout chaos has come and gone. And yes, a good name, a good fitting name. There were knockdowns, there was drama, and to close out the night, a huge knockout delivery by one Anthony Joshua. And we're gonna dive into the matches that I kept a closer eye on, and you could go ahead and leave me a comment as soon as you see me post on Instagram. You guys know that the episode will be live on whatever your favorite podcast platform may be. And or if you guys know that your episode, you guys catch wind that the episode's already gone live and you're checking me out on this episode, then go to Instagram. Do me a favor, go to Instagram and like the post corresponding to the episode. Comment on it. I want to hear from you guys. If there's a fight that I should have paid attention to that I didn't, and we could talk about it. I definitely want to know your feedback. I want to hear from you guys, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram as well. Let's help that page grow, and we continue to get notoriety and bring notoriety to the show that you guys have helped build to what it is today. We continue to get downloads every day, and it excites me every time I see that another episode got downloaded. It's awesome because I know that a project that began so long ago with me just basically just speaking out to the wind, to anybody that was willing to lend an ear, what have you. But mostly it was just me just venting. What it started, it built the passion for this podcast game, and it built a fire in me. And look, we're well over 200 episodes, and we're still going strong. If anything, stronger than ever at this moment. And now I have you guys as followers, as listeners, and you guys continue to push me to keep coming back to the microphone and recording. And my passion for boxing has come back and stronger than ever. And we're going to continue doing big things this year, continue trying to grow this show and getting to bigger and better places and taking the show to new heights. And of course, it can't be done without you guys' help. So I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And I do not take you guys for granted for one slight second. Not at all. With that, let's jump into this card, and I'll start with the first fight that I was paying attention to, which was at 154 pounds. Interesting because the super welterweight division was dominated and secured by one Jermell Charlo after that rematch victory over Brian Castaño. A fight in their first encounter, which came down to basically a commentary. It came down to opinion, basically, as to those that were divided, whether Brian Castaño did enough to have secured a win, which I still feel that he did. At that time, it was deemed a draw, if I remember correctly, and they each kept their titles. It was actually a draw. Now that I sunk in, and that's what caused the rematch. They each kept their titles, and then the rematch came. And when that rematch happened, Jermell Charlo adjusted, made the necessary adjustments, while Brian Castaño brought the same fight. He continued from round 13, whereas Jermell took this as a brand new fight and approached this with the knowledge that he had gained from the first encounter. He made the necessary adjustments. Derek James worked a beautiful game plan, and they boxed beautifully to where it led to Jermell Charlo pulling off a late stoppage of Brian Castaño. An awesome stoppage. Jermell Charlo was crowned the undisputed champion of the 154-pound division. He never got to defend that throne. He never got to step into the ring and put all titles on the line. And his next fight came against Canelo Alvarez, which happened last September, which was supposed to be a mega fight type, not an actual defense. A fight where Canelo Alvarez actually put his titles on the line for the up-and-coming champion, the undisputed champ at 154 who dared to be great, moved up 2 divisions to challenge Canelo for his straps because Canelo's not going to drop down to 154 anymore. So he put his titles on the line. To Canelo's defense, he has met his what's the word that I'm looking for? The demand? His mandatories, I guess. That's what I was trying to get. I don't know why I was looking for a fancier word. But every one of the mandatory or the mandates that he's had by the sanctioning bodies, the very last one came by way of John Ryder. And he defended his titles against John Ryder. That was his homecoming fight out in Mexico. Then he got to have his exhibition type match, this mega fight, undisputed versus undisputed, one moving up 2 divisions to challenge him. Doesn't matter if it was a mismatch or what, because if Jermell would have been successful, it would have been historic. At least one for the record books. People say it's a mismatch, but yet they're clamoring for Terrence Crawford to go face Canelo Alvarez, who campaigns at 147, 1 division south of what Jermell does. So, that's the last time that we saw Jermell. Leading into that fight, the sanctioning bodies begin to pull their titles. Didn't back Jermell. As we stand now, basically all of sanctioning bodies have walked away from Jermell. He is the very last undisputed champion at 154, but he doesn't have any titles anymore. And the only remaining sanctioning body is the WBA, which has recognized or at least listed Jermell as a champion in recess. And they made the title available in tonight's card. All that leading into the fight that we're going to talk about. The IBO champ, James Metcalf, out of the UK. Champion in recess, Jermell Charlo for the WBA, with the WBA world title being vacant and on the line in Riyadh earlier tonight. No WBC champion listed. WBO champ is Tim Tszyu, who fought for the vacant against Brian Mendoza in his last outing. Great fight, great performance by Tim Tszyu, and now he's going to be putting that title on the line against Keith Thurman, who has been an inactive fighter whom we last saw at 147. Or at least in his heyday, he was a 147 unified champ. Your newest champion is Israil Madrimov from Uzbekistan. And he faced Magomed Kurbanov. And it was a very interesting fight where both fighters coming into this were undefeated. Madrimov had a draw on his record, still does. That was against Michael Soro, an opponent that he faced in 2021 and he knocked out in the 9th round. Not Michael Soro, sorry, Michel Soro, Frenchman. Knocked him out in 2021, December of 21 in the 9th round, and they got right back to it, facing each other in their very next outing, July of 22, in which they come away with a technical draw due to an unintentional head clash between the two. That's the draw that Madrimov has on his record. Other than that, unblemished. He was last active April of 23, and here we are in March, 11 months later, and he comes back and fights for the WBA vacant title at 154 and gets his hand raised. He is the new WBA champion at 154. Came away with a stoppage win today over Magomed Kurbanov. If you don't know or remember the last time you saw Magomed Kurbanov, well, you saw him fighting Michel Soro, whom he beat by split decision to get himself into this running. That was May of last year. He fought Patrick Teixeira, who's a Golden Boy fighter, and beat him by unanimous decision. But I think to date, his highest profile fight came against Liam Smith, where they fought out in Russia, and he got the unanimous decision win over Liam Smith. That might be the most recognizable fight of Kurbanov's career to date. That was the loss that Liam Smith took prior to getting back on his winning ways later that same year, a few months later, when he stopped Anthony Fowler, stopped Jesse Vargas, stopped McQuinio, stopped Chris Eubank Jr. to kick off 2023, and then got himself into the high-profile rematch that we witnessed last September, where Chris Eubank Jr. hired Bomac, Terrence's trainer, and Eubank Jr. ended up pulling off the stoppage in the 10th round of Liam Smith. So just giving you a full roundabout, that's where you would recognize Kurbanov from. Kurbanov came into this fight as an undefeated fighter, a 25-0 record with 13 knockouts to his name, and now he has his first blemish of his professional career, which came at the hand of Israil Madrimov. A good fight where Kurbanov looked a lot more flat-footed than we're accustomed to seeing. He looked a lot more hesitant, tried to initiate his attacks by way of the body, but was a little bit too slow. Madrimov on point, Madrimov with combinations. Madrimov mixed his attack. And he mixed his attack so well that he was creating openings time and again. By the mid to end of the 4th round, Madrimov looked like he was going to be pulling off the stoppage, or at least the momentum was completely in his way. First 2 rounds were a little bit like always, the feeler rounds. But Madrimov quickly started switching momentum to his side. By the 4th round, it looked like we were headed in the direction where the fight led to. And by the 5th round, he comes away with the stoppage. The fight was somewhat close. One of the judges up to that point had it a draw. One of the judges had Madrimov up by 2 rounds, which is basically how we're calling the fight. And one of them had all 4 rounds to Madrimov. The middle judge, the 39-37 judge that had it up to that point, that's pretty much how I was seeing it. Both fighters trying to initiate, but it was early. I mean, it was the 5th round. 2-minute 20 mark of the 5th round is where the stoppage came. It was early. They were starting to implement, but you could tell that Kurbanov was just a step behind today, having a lot more trouble initiating his attack and getting into a groove where Madrimov just picked up and just wouldn't let up. He just kept incrementing as the fight wore on. Israil Madrimov is your newest 154-pound champion. So now you have Tim Tszyu, you have Israil Madrimov, and that's it. The rest of the division is pretty much open. We haven't heard from Brian Castaño since. Tim Tszyu's going to be fighting Keith Thurman. We haven't heard of Brian Mendoza. Fundora's going to be getting himself into a fight fairly soon. I mean, we got Jesus Ramos, who we haven't heard of either. We got Danny Garcia, who campaigned at that division, but also inactive, maybe closer to retirement than not. And that's that. So that's your newest champion at 154, Israil Madrimov out of Uzbekistan. Incredible win, knockout win. That's the way to secure a title and not leave it to question. And I say that because that's going to give us our segue to the very next fight that we're going to talk about, which is The featherweight division, Rey Vargas put his title on the line against the pint-sized heavy puncher Nick Ball. A 5'7" and change Rey Vargas versus a 5'2" mini-sized Nick Ball, whose nickname is very fitting, the Wrecking Ball. Nick Wrecking Ball. Both undefeated. Well, Nick Ball came into this undefeated. Rey Vargas has not lost a fight, has very close fights, has been on the verge of losing fights, has not lost a fight at this weight. His blemish to date came at the hands of O'Shaquie Foster when Rey Vargas, who is the current WBC champ at 126, moved up to 130 trying to secure that vacant WBC title and came up short, vacated by Shakur Stevenson. He fought for the vacant title against O'Shaquie Foster, and O'Shaquie Foster was just too quick, too much for him on that night. Outboxed him, outpointed him, outworked him, and beat him. And that's why O'Shaquie Foster is your current 130 champ, the WBC champ. Rey Vargas retained his title, though, at 126, and this is his defense. Nick Ball became his mandatory. And the taller, longer reach of Rey Vargas was going to be the story. How was Nick Ball going to get in there? We've seen this before. And when you're outsized, what are you going to do? Bite down on the mouth guard, tighten up your guard, lunge forward, or get in on the body. Nice and tight, low and tight, get in on the body, wear out that body, and then start working on the head. Well, Nick Ball's a headhunter. He just wants all action. He would attack the body from time to time, but basically he resorted to just lunging forward and trying to muddy the waters, which he did. Rey Vargas and Nick Ball end up fighting to a draw. A split draw is what was rendered today, which keeps Rey Vargas as the champion, keeps the title around Rey Vargas' waist, and Frank Warren, who's a promoter of Nick Ball, is immediately calling for a rematch. People were booing, and it was a fight of two tales because Rey Vargas feels that there was a little home cooking. Even though they were out in Saudi Arabia, it was a heavily influenced English crowd. If there were any Mexican fans on hand, you wouldn't know it. So in that sense, he was right. The judges ended up giving a 114-112 Massimo Barrovecchio, 114-112 for Vargas. Ray Denseco had it a draw. Jun Bei Lim had Nick Ball winning 116-110. Crazy. There were two knockdowns. One of them, which should not have been a knockdown. Nonetheless, amidst the tussle, this happened in the 8th round where Nick Ball is starting to muddy up the waters. In the 7th, he started making it a little bit more evident. In the 2nd round, it started becoming a little more evident. But Rey Vargas basically held his own for the larger portion of the fight. And if I didn't score this fight because I was enjoying the fight, but I had Rey Vargas comfortable until the knockdowns came. And then I started getting a little bit wary of, wait a minute, this is going to shift the score. Who knows how they're scoring it? This is going to be huge on the scorecards because there were some tight rounds. But overall, I had Rey Vargas in the lead. The first knockdown should not have been a knockdown, in my opinion, where at the end of the 7th round, you see Nick Ball starting to just dirty this up. Maidana Mayweather style. Elbows, forearms, rubbing the face, rubbing the chin, pushing forward, lunging forward, hugging, tugging, you name it. That's how the 7th round ended, with both of them going forehead to forehead and the referee having to split them and send them to their respective corners. By the 8th round, more of the same. Nick Ball started switching momentum to his side where he knew that it was starting to frustrate Rey Vargas and he was starting to wear out a tired Rey Vargas and that it was working. roughing him up was working. And he stuck to that plan. They end up coming together where he ends up basically hugging Rey Vargas and turns him towards his right side, towards Nick Ball's right side, spinning him, lets go of him as Rey Vargas is stumbling, trying to gather his legs, crossed his feet, trying to gather his legs. Nick Ball manages to land these short looping punches, one of them actually to the left cheek of Rey Vargas, upper left cheek temple. And he crossed him. He landed 2 punches in succession of that tussle. And as Rey Vargas is off balance, got hit with those 2 punches, and in succession hits the canvas. The referee separates him. Nick Ball walks right in between Rey Vargas and the referee, loops around to the ropes. The referee stands in between them and continues a count of 4 and 5, and Rey Vargas begins to protest. And the corner, you could hear them, and they're protesting this. That it shouldn't have been a knockdown, that this was a push, that was illegal. The count resumed. Rey Vargas was on his feet, protesting, disappointed. The fight continued, and Nick Ball continued the assault on Vargas, if we could call it that. He drops Rey Vargas in the 10th. And that, even though Rey Vargas argued that one, he drops him in the 11th round. In the 10th, there was some huge body shots that Rey Vargas landed on Nick Ball. By the 11th, Nick Ball lunges forward as he's continuously pushing Vargas to fight on his back foot. Vargas finds himself with his back on the ropes. Nick Ball lunges forward. Vargas moving away, scurrying away from the onslaught, claims that they tangled their feet, but Nick Ball was lunging forward and connected and dropped Rey Vargas. That was more of a knockdown than the first one, even though there was, if you look at the replay, it does look like their feet are being tangled or Nick Ball stepped on Rey Vargas' foot as he's trying to get away. Not deliberately, it's just the way that they were, at least in my opinion. It wasn't deliberate, it didn't look like it was deliberate. It was just the movement of Nick Ball as he's just going straight in for the kill. And Rey Vargas trying to get out of the way, sliding along the ropes. And their feet came together, and he gets hit as he's trying to get out of the way of the punch and got caught and dropped. That was more of a secure knockdown, but now you got 2 knockdowns that, in my opinion, I was like, I have no idea how these scorecards are going to turn out. And well, I just read them to you. I still feel like Rey Vargas did enough, maybe 7-5. But those knockdowns, I could definitely see, since I wasn't scoring it, I mean, I get it. I could see that the 2 knockdowns could definitely give the decision over to Nick Ball, because the fight was that close in the second half. But in the first half of the fight, maybe even up to the first 7 rounds, I think I had Rey Vargas up on the majority of the scorecards. At least for me, I had him up for the majority of the rounds. Up to the 7th, I was just watching, and I'm like, yep, he's outboxing him. He's connecting, he's landing those punches from a distance, but his legs got tired. It looks like he ended up getting tired. Nick Ball capitalized on it. And once he started muddying the waters, the whole second half, definitely from the second half of the 7th or closing of the 7th round, the 8th with the knockdown, Nick Ball was pretty much pressing from there on. and connecting. Maybe some warnings, maybe some points, but that didn't happen. So the fact that a draw was rendered, I'm okay with it. Should Nick Ball be the champion? Those knockdowns, based on the way that the second half of the fight went, yes, Nick Ball could potentially be the champion. I could definitely see that happening. Should Rey Vargas have retained his title? Yes, I can make a case for him as well, because he did box the majority and scored successfully the majority of the rounds, in my opinion. But those knockdowns weigh heavy. That's 4 points right there. So the draw, the fight being a story of two tales, the draw ends up basically letting you know how inconclusive the result of the fight was, because it was exactly that, a story of two tales. They both did enough, or they both did a great amount of work, but not enough to have swayed or tipped the scales. So if Frank Warren and Nick Ball are disputing and the crowd was booing, and Rey Vargas walks away feeling like he was against all odds, the crowd, the judges, the atmosphere feels that the referee was wrong, and he feels like he was slighted. Both of them they ended up basically witnessing and being part of two completely different fights, in their opinions. So if they want to do a rematch, why not? One thing is for sure that I walked away with this, because we just had the other two featherweight champions active this past Saturday on Top Rank's card. Raymond Ford became the newest champion of the WBA and of the 126-pound division. And Luis Alberto Lopez, El Venado Lopez, successfully defended his IBF title. 3 of the 4 champions active in 8 days' time. Rey Vargas retains his title. And then we have Divino, who lifted the title from Robeisy Ramirez back in December. They look like they're in negotiations for a rematch. Robeisy and Espinosa. Venado successfully defended, stopping Rey Abe. Raymond Ford stops Kolmatov and becomes the new champ. He potentially will vacate if he moves up to 130. I don't think he's going to be seeking a rematch with Kolmatov, even though it would be an amazing fight for the sport of boxing for us fans. But Raymond Ford had given an interview where he said that if Nick Ball became the champion, he'd be willing to unify against Nick Ball, which he didn't. And what I'm walking away with is that Rey Vargas, even though he's unblemished and undefeated at this weight, with his sole loss coming at the chance that he took at 130 against Oshaki and came up short, he is not as dominant as we once thought he was. And I think Venado or Rey Ford could beat Rey Vargas should they seek a unification with them. And if they don't pursue this rematch, or this rematch doesn't take place, Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, now that they're working together, I could definitely see Raymond Ford and Nick Ball putting his title against Nick Ball. Rey Vargas, I believe, is still with PBC. So that's going to be a little bit tougher for him. So out of the champions, I feel like maybe Espinosa, Rey Vargas, should that fight fall through, his rematch with Robeisy Ramirez, I think Espinosa, Rey Vargas would probably be the more fan-friendly and the more doable of the fights. And Venado and Raymond Ford put on by Top Rank again. But I don't see Rey Vargas being a champion for much longer at 126. He's had too many close calls, and Venado is solid. Espinosa looked good lifting that title against Robeisy, but I think Robeisy in a rematch, that's a you pick 'em type of fight, and I wouldn't doubt that Robeisy gets his title back if they do secure that rematch. Raymond Ford is just, his nickname says it, he's straight savage. He turned that beast mode on against Komatov in the 12th to close out that fight. But I think Venado's probably the most solid of the 126 champions right now. And if he was to fight Rey Vargas, which is a fight that they've been seeking, a Mexico versus Mexico encounter, I think Venado just outpoints and stops Rey Vargas. He's that good and that underrated and that underappreciated right now. Venado is. He's a special guy. He's a special champ. So Rey Vargas retains against Nick Ball. Little bit of controversy there, or a lot in their opinion, but Rey Vargas still 126-pound champ. Then we move on to the co-main between Big Bang Zhang and Joseph Parker. Another fight where Big Bang Zhang was upset that the decision wasn't rendered his way. Joseph Parker ends up getting the majority decision. And even though the scores were pretty tight, we have a similar case to that of the last fight with Ball and Vargas. There were knockdowns. Big Bang Zhang starts strong, has a heavy punch. We saw that. We saw what he did to Joe Joyce, the juggernaut. Zhang dismantled the juggernaut in both of their encounters last year. And if you remember, the big, what was it called? The Reckoning Day event in December that Riyadh put together. The heavyweights that were not present were Zhang, were Joyce, Andy Ruiz, Luis Ortiz, King Kong. Several champions that were missing, but Joseph Parker was active on that card. So was Anthony Joshua, who main evented. Tyson Fury and Usyk, of course, they were not there. They weren't part of that big heavyweight showdown, the big heavyweight mega card that took place in December. Well, why? Zhang, coming off his 2 victories over Joe Joyce, ended up sitting that one out, but he was fairly active all year. Joe Joyce, recovering from those 2 beatdowns that he took at the hand of Zhang. Andy Ruiz, recovering from shoulder surgery and failed to negotiate a contract with Deontay Wilder. So Deontay Wilder parted those negotiations and went into the fight with Joseph Parker as the co-main event to Anthony Joshua and Wallen. Usyk and Fury, of course, they were about to fight in February, so they had a fight scheduled already for all the belts, for all the glory of heavyweights, for the lineal championship. And Tyson Fury suffers an injury, a cut on his brow, and now the fight has been rescheduled for May, if I remember correctly. May 17th or something like that. That's the reason they weren't part of that big heavyweight mega card. But now look at Joseph Parker. He ended up dismantling Deontay Wilder in that co-main event. And then he comes into this fight with momentum on his side against a fighter that has momentum on his side after having destroyed one of the biggest names and prospects and contenders of the heavyweight division in Joe Joyce. Zhang catapulted himself as to one of the biggest threats in the division. And this is what we had today as a co-main event, a fight that could have been a main event in their own right any other date, but chose to be a co-main to Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou today. Zhang started strong. Zhang started with a very stiff jab, very powerful punch that took Joseph Parker a while to settle into his game plan, to settle into his flow, and meanwhile took a lot of damage. Took a heavy punch from Zhang and withstood the damage. The early rounds going to Zhang, and it looked like it was going to be a one-sided fight. By the 3rd round, Zhang drops Parker. And it looked like we were headed for another one-sided showdown. And another type of performance similar to what he had done against Joyce. Drops Parker in the 3rd. But Parker You guys have heard me time and again. Every time I cover Joseph Parker, he is not flashy. He doesn't need to change his game plan. He is very consistent. He is your go-to blue-collar style boxer. A traditionalist who has a good game plan, especially with Andy Lee on his side. He sets a good game plan. He doesn't abandon the game plan, and he goes to work. And whether he's in trouble or not, he continues coming at you and continues implementing his game plan. Is very apt at listening to his corner and adapting on the fly. He is as blue collar, as traditional boxer as you get in today's heavyweight division and boxing and throughout boxing. Zhang drops him in the third, and we have a one-sided fight going into the fourth, where Joseph Parker starts finding success. And Parker would continue that success, getting popped here and there, of course, because you're standing against a massive man who had a 44 pound, or I think it was a 44 pound advantage on him, 291 to 247. A massive man that's in front of him. And he continued to deal with what Zhang was delivering and continue to do work. Outwork, outpoint, outbox Zhang. Joseph Parker solid throughout the night and gets caught again in the 8th round. Dropped again. Momentum shifts to Zilei's side. But he failed to capitalize. He let Parker survive the round. And Parker gets right back to work. Blue collar style, like I said, just gets right back to work. Hurt, dazed, continues going forward, continues doing work. Continues taking the fight to Zhang, where I didn't see Zhang win any other round after that. He caught Parker several times, especially with those sneaky uppercuts and those sneaky center pops that he does when he would catch Parker ducking. But too little, too few, too far in between for Zhilei Zhang. Aside from the 2 knockdowns and the early good start that he had, Joseph Parker, once he got to work, he didn't take his foot off the gas. He wasn't as aggressive as we saw him against Deontay Wilder, but he was very consistent, and that's what we can expect from Joseph Parker each time out. Consistency. The scores by the judges rendered were 115, 111 by Patrick Morley in favor of Joseph Parker. We have Sultan and Yeti, who issued this fight a draw. And we had Steve Gray, who rendered it 114, 112 for Joseph Parker. Majority decision win. He continues his streak. He is now 35-3 with 23 knockouts to his favor. Of those 3 losses, he's been stopped once, and that came against Joe Joyce. That was his last defeat in September of 22. That's where Joyce was going skyrocketing to the very top of the division. Since then, Joseph Parker has amassed wins over Jack Massey, Fega Opelu, Simon Keane, Deontay Wilder, and now Zhilei Zhang. And if they don't get a rematch, which immediately in the post-fight interview and in-ring, Andy Lee and Joseph Parker called for a rematch with Zhilei Zhang. But if that doesn't happen, which I don't even see why they would want to do a rematch with Zhang, just move on and go avenge the loss to Joe Joyce. That would be the best scenario. We'll see how that plays out. So congrats to Joseph Parker, who remains on a streak and on his winning ways. 5th win in a row for Joseph Parker. He's on a roll. He's on a roll. And now it's just a matter of how this is going to play out at the top between Fury and Usyk in a couple months' time. And the main eventer, who was Anthony Joshua against Francis Ngannou, well, there's not much to say there. We don't know what Francis Ngannou had leading into this. We know he has a lot of power. We know he has power that hits you like a Mack truck, and stopping power, knockout power. He dropped Tyson Fury, shocking the entire world. He didn't win the fight. He didn't win the boxing match, but he won the world and the fans over with that type of performance. In a boxing debut against arguably the best heavyweight boxer in the world today. The lineal champ at that, in Tyson Fury. And he performed in such an impressive fashion and dropped the champion, where he managed and garnered the praises of the boxing world and the world in its entirety, the combat sports world in its entirety with that type of performance. So he goes into this fight against Anthony Joshua, a 2-time unified champion, a behemoth of a man, someone who was deemed unstoppable until Andy Ruiz did the unimaginable. And then his most recent defeats in succession to Alexander Usyk, who is your standing unified champ, current unified champ in the heavyweight division, and is putting all those straps on the line against one Tyson Fury, who was successful in getting a decision win over Francis Ngannou. Here's the drama. Tyson Fury says he hit him with everything. He even hit him with an elbow, which is all over the memes and shorts and reels that you could find, where Tyson Fury clearly elbows Francis Ngannou and couldn't drop or stop Ngannou. And it creates a huge narrative when Tyson Fury opens his mouth and says that, because here's your lineal champ who hit a newcomer to the heavyweight division, not a nobody. This is not Jake Paul's opposition. This is not a nobody. A Francis Ngannou who left the UFC as the standing heavyweight champion. A Francis Ngannou who began his professional career as an amateur boxer, as a boxer in his own right, or professional boxer, and transitioned over to MMA full-time when he made his way towards France. From there, he started making his way up the organizations and eventually landed in the UFC. And he took a loss to Stipe in the UFC, but skyrocketed within avenging that loss against Stipe, lifting the title, and skyrocketed in the UFC as the most dominant and the scariest champ at that time. Contract negotiations and lack thereof, disputes between him and Dana White and the UFC caused Francis Ngannou to walk away while being the standing champion for the UFC. In a fight that he was supposed to negotiate to have a big mega event against John Jones. He walks away, and if he remains in MMA, whether he goes to the PFL, who recently purchased Bellator, or he goes to ONE FC, he's gonna be massive. If what he's looking for is money, he's there. And he's made possibly the 2 biggest purses of his life, just having faced 2 of the 3 top level heavyweights that we have in today's boxing. Tyson Fury and now Anthony Joshua. He got a lot of experience against Tyson Fury and got a lot of confidence that he could do this, and stepped into the ring against Anthony Joshua, your former unified champ. How did it go? Anthony Joshua got right to work where he left off with Wallin and did not let off. He has not taken his foot off the gas. He is in a great state right now. He's in a great position, great state of mind, great state of boxing. His abilities are there. He looks amazing. Otto Wallin, whom I thought was going to pull a similar card to what Alexander Usyk did and outbox based on the performance that he had against Tyson Fury, I was giving the praise to Otto Wallin and the benefit of the doubt that he may actually outbox Anthony Joshua, frustrate him and outbox him, because Otto Wallin's that good of a boxer. He has very good pedigree boxing. Anthony Joshua put an end to all that and finished Otto Wallin with his heavy punching, his combinations, and shooting down center, down range, and popped and busted up Otto Wallin and stopped them in 5 rounds in December as the main event of the reckoning, the day of reckoning. Here he goes a couple months later, and he drops Ngannou 3 times. The shock drop in the first round, where again he shoots down range with Ngannou's wide stance, wide gloves, not protecting the center, not protecting his chin. And Joshua, with very good hip movement and good reflexes, manages to get out of the punch, get out of the way, and shoot down center and caught Francis Ngannou. In what could have been considered a flash knockdown, because it caught Ngannou off guard, but it was as solid as you could get of a knockdown, where he landed on the button and shook Ngannou. Ngannou shook it off, the round ends, gets back to work, his confidence is up, and it's almost like you could see that Ngannou was on all cylinders firing by the second round. He was super aware, super hesitant, flinchy at that, very aware of everything that Anthony Joshua was doing, but the experience in this realm of combat sports and boxing has to go to Anthony Joshua. He displayed every single bit of his knowledge and experience as a former unified champion, 2-time at that, and how good of a boxing pedigree he possesses still. His knowledge, his recognition, his reaction is all there for Anthony Joshua, whereas Francis Ngannou's not used to this. And as an MMA practitioner, they're usually limited when it comes to sole boxing. And Anthony Joshua showed and exposed that today. No matter how apt and how aware Francis Ngannou was in there, he was just not going to be outsmarting a former unified champ. Someone who's been at the top of the heap for years and years and years until the unimaginable happened against Andy Ruiz. And then he had to reinvent himself after those 2 losses to Alexander Usyk, losing all the belts. He got his titles back, got his legs, his titles back in that rematch with Andy Ruiz. But then the mental game entered, the mental defeat, the self-doubt that he could not beat, that he got bested, that he just got outpointed, outworked, out everything against Alexander Usyk in the first time. And then the second time, he again is unable to regain his titles. And again is basically picked apart by Usyk. The mental game kicked in, so we didn't know what to expect when he was going to fight Wallin in December against another decent, or not decent, but good boxer. And he outshined. And now comes this, and he knocks out Francis Ngannou in a scary fashion, where Ngannou's right leg folds in such a manner where it was just cringy to watch, and his head slams the canvas, and he was down and out. This is the 3rd time that he got dropped. He gets dropped early in the second round, and then Joshua follows it up with a nasty punch to the temple, which causes this knockout that I'm describing. And it was all she wrote. 2 rounds at the 2:38 mark of the second round. Nasty knockout with a man who had 40 pounds over him. Ngannou weighed in at 272 and change, where Joshua weighed in at 252. Sorry, 20 pounds in difference. Ngannou gets his second loss of his professional boxing career, and more than likely will be going to, unless he gets another big name, say the winner of Fury and Usyk. If Fury wins, you have the biggest mega event now, Fury and Joshua, that will sell out the Wimbledon, and it will more than likely be the walkaway fight for both of them, very likely. Which is what they've been calling for years, and now the landscape is there because of Anthony Joshua having brought everything back full circle. But Fury has his work cut out for him. with the current unified champion Alexander Usyk. That's how good this could play out for the boxing world, for Fury and Joshua in a huge, mega super fight. UK side. And then you probably have Francis Ngannou face Alexander Usyk in another big money fight, or maybe Alexander Ngannou and Wilder. As Wilder seems to be wanting to cash out and seems like he's on the way out as well. Congrats to Francis Ngannou for having the guts to step in there again against a top dog, one of the 3 top heavyweights in the world right now, and a former unified champ at that. And if he goes to MMA, I have no doubt, regardless of the organization that he goes to, that he's going to be the heavyweight champ of that said organization, regardless of where he goes. He's that good in MMA. And he's right when he gives those interviews. If this fight was to take place in the streets, it would be a whole different story. If it was in the MMA octagon, it would be a whole different story. And he's right. Because he practices a completely different format, a completely different art form. And you're right. But as far as this form of a martial art in boxing, he just got bested for the second time. But he then again is not taking the Jake Paul route or trying to build up saying that he's somebody to get himself into a big fight. He took on the two of the 3 best heavyweights in the entire world for the last few years. These guys have been consistently at the top. The lineal champion Tyson Fury and a former 2-time unified champion Anthony Joshua, who is right there knocking on the door of whoever wins that fight between Fury and Usyk in a couple months' time. Congrats to Anthony Joshua, who continues on his winning ways, has found himself again, and is now on a 4-fight win streak himself. Amazing night. Great card by Riyadh, who continues to put on these good, big events. Odd timing at that, because one, it's a Friday. I ended up watching this fight around 4 o'clock my time. So odd. It's odd to watch boxing in those days when I'm so used to Saturday night main events. But listen, you can't miss these, and you make the sacrifice for the sake of watching these greats do their work. Just like when I wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning to watch the cards out of Japan when Naoya Inoue or Nakatani most recently was active. So when you're a fan, you're a fan. And you do your best to not miss these big events. You can't catch them all. But when you can, hell, you give it a good go. So I'll leave you guys with this. Thank you guys again for all the love, for all the support, and I'll catch you guys on the very next episode. Take care of yourselves and have a safe and great night.